the way that many of us at Infineo have interacted with you is through security tokens and the various
That's right.
ventures that you've started. So can you speak a little bit about that, and then we'll unpack it for the listeners?
With pleasure. So as I mentioned, while I was in school, I started a compliance company. It just so happened to be that the Jobs Act had passed of 2012. This was, the first time any major legislation had happened towards securities laws since 1933 and 1934 and 1940 and some other small changes. But ultimately, this was like, hey, we're going to change the way you can raise capital. And it introduced a lot of new ways that entrepreneurs digitally can raise money, as well as from who they can raise from, right? So I saw an opportunity there because I was dealing with entrepreneurs trying to raise money day in, day out at the launchpad at this program. And I said, you know what? Now there's a way for them to put a landing page up, raise money for their business that way. And that's, of course, going to be, hugely, massively disruptive. I remember reading headlines that were like, venture capitalists are going to be put out of a job because now the crowd is going to be able to pick all the best new companies. And it's like, of course, fast forward to today, and it's like VCs are bigger than ever. And, the overall industry for crowdfunding didn't really grow as one would have expected. But I had built a compliance company to help make sure that when you're raising capital, you can basically verify that your investors qualify for certain exemptions, the ones that allow you to invest a lot of money. The term is accredited investor. For anyone who doesn't know, it's just essentially the SEC's way of saying you're rich enough to invest. And those means are essentially $1 million net worth or a couple $100,000 in income. So my technology verifies that information, because if you want to invest online, you actually have to share that information. And so we're kind of like a middle layer as a privacy layer, as well as an efficiency layer, because our technology makes it really easy to actually go ahead and share this information with us so that we can verify it, which means that you don't have to share it to the issuer, which would be like ridiculous, right? If you were like, Dr. Murphy's like, hey, you want to invest in my token, and you were like, give me all your net worth information, I'd be like, no, dude, I'm going to pass. But this way, you get a certificate that lets you qualify. And so running that business for 5 years as a CEO, I learned, I don't want to say I went to law school, but I definitely got a very good understanding of all the different securities exemptions that are out there for private companies, all the different compliance steps, the way that companies were digitally raising money. My technology fit into a lot of that. So I got to see a lot of that, and that converged into blockchain in 2017. We're a local company. I've been in Miami. I stuck around in Miami since. And a local facial recognition company. They were raising their Series B, very legitimate. They had venture capital, legitimate backers. And they were like, hey, can you help me do an ICO? You kind of know blockchain and you know this fundraising stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I could help you, but you're not going to do an ICO, right? Because I already knew that this was a serious problem, that companies were going to get securities violations. And I told them, we're going to work with the right attorneys. We're going to tokenize your existing shares. And that's what you're going to raise money with. This was the heyday.
Hey, Herwgi, let me stop you. So 90% of the audience knows what an ICO is, and probably half of them have participated in them. But just, can you spell what does that mean? And just make sure we're not losing people.
Sorry. ICO stands for initial coin offering. And so back in since Bitcoin came around, the biggest invention since then, I would say, was Ethereum launching smart contracts that enabled this craze called ICOs, initial coin offerings, where the technology of minting tokens kind of was introduced to the world. And people realized, hey, I can exchange my minted tokens for people's Ethereum, and I could raise money this way for whatever use case it might be. And so you saw projects raise, in some cases, billions of dollars via these ICOs, individual projects raising billions of dollars basically overnight. It was actually crazy to see. And of course, a lot of them were offering terms and rewards and incentives for investing that were just absolute no-nos in terms of the SEC, in terms of securities laws. And so the SEC had to go and enforce these ICO projects, and a lot of them shut down. A lot of them had to return these billions of dollars. Telegram is a famous company. That's one of them, right? And so I actually already had the foresight knowing that they were going to get shut down thanks to my compliance company. And so I helped this company do it the right way by tokenizing their stock, registering with the SEC a private exemption so that they actually were telling them we're raising money for this token. And then they limited their investors to the investors that qualified, which were international investors and accredited investors in the United States. They raised $12 million in 2 weeks during the height of the heyday. And that's when the light bulb moment went off. I was like, wow, this is going to disrupt all capital markets. And so I started a consulting firm to help others do exactly the same thing, and eventually stepped down from my compliance company to be able to do it full time.
Okay, so again, a lot of this is going to be elementary, but I think it's useful for at least some of the listeners. What specific? So the ICOs, they're bringing all this money, and then the SEC said, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And you kind of saw this coming. Was it just that it was so novel that technically there was no? I guess what I'm getting at is the things they were doing in the beginning. Was it just demonstrably you can't do that, or was it more like it was the Wild West, and you figured at some point they're going to come in and say you can't do that because it violates the spirit of the pre-existing framework?
It's definitely was the Wild West because this was imagine this was a little bit like the internet coming around, and it was the idea. I would link it maybe akin to you can now launch a website, and the idea that anybody can put something on the internet via a website that anybody around the world can access. That was an incredible innovation. And now you're introducing this coin element to it, which was a transfer of value concept, where you now were able to essentially raise capital via a coin offering, hence the term ICO. And it was absolutely the Wild West. There were attorneys trying to give advice. There were some attorneys giving bad advice. And all it took was the ability to mint tokens in order to do an ICO, essentially, right? So it was definitely before it became common knowledge that you have to follow certain rules. It was anything goes, anybody goes.
Okay, and again, this is going to be so elementary, but just to make sure people who are new to this area. So you kind of had an offhand remark about, first there was Bitcoin, then there was Ethereum, and that had the smart contract capability in it, and then that's what spawned all these ICOs. And so it wouldn't make sense to say, oh, why couldn't a company do an ICO with Bitcoin? Because the point is people give you money and you give them coins that you create or mint yourself. And that's the whole point of Bitcoin is you can't just, one person just can't start cranking out more Bitcoins. And so that's why, right? Okay.
Right, exactly. Bitcoin is just one universal ledger of one currency on its own protocol with its own consensus mechanism. Ethereum is a different one with this application to be able to essentially code on top of it, code onto the blockchain and create your own tokens, leveraging the same software, if you will. And so, yeah, it was anybody goes. It was, hey, this tool was out in anybody's hands. You could go out and market a token you had just created last night in your bedroom. And next thing you know, it raised millions of dollars because Telegram channels went crazy over the idea that you put out to the world.
Mm-hmm. And now the coins themselves, was the typical case, like there was some company that had a new idea of what they were doing, not necessarily involved in digital assets, but their funding mechanism, instead of conventionally issuing stock or just finding a bunch of private investors, was to, hey, we'll go ahead. I guess just like if they did a GoFundMe or something and used PayPal or whatever, that's not using blockchain technology. It's just that's one way, a way to sort of decentralize, to get more funding. That's what there is. So the ICO, it's not that the coin was like, hey, this is a better coin than Bitcoin. It's just that, no, this is issued by this particular company. And if you like what we're doing, you like our business plan, this is a very low overhead way for you to get equity in our firm. Is that the idea?
I'm glad you brought up that model. It was very much so akin to a stock offering. It was, hey, we have a project. We need money. We need investors in order to make it happen. And we believe there's going to be some kind of value. Now, the concept was the value is going to be generated through the token. And there wasn't actually terms put in place between you and I as an investment. Like when I bought your token, if you were one of these ICO issuers, as an example, I actually don't have investor rights that were enforceable in court to say, hey, man, if you went and bought Ferraris with this, I can take you to court because that's not what we agreed you were going to do. So it was very much so, again, the Wild West, which is why this was happening.
Hey everybody, this is Bob Murphy. Thanks for listening to this clip from the In5 podcast. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing and share this video with others. We've got new episodes dropping every Friday with more insightful discussions. Stay tuned.